Next, we have our mentor, the keynote mentor for AgStart 2021, and she also happens to be the patron of AgStart Africa. She is in the person of Honorable Dr. Zenator Rawlings. She's also the MP for Kwate constituency. She's a woman of many parts. Shall we receive Honorable Dr. Zenator Rawlings?
Thank you so very much. I would like to stand on previous protocols and acknowledge Agrihouse and all the amazing speakers and mentors and facilitators and sponsors, and of course, the attendees, because this program would be nothing without you. So thank you all for being here. I'm so inspired, Mr. Boateng. Please, can you please mentor me? Honestly, this is the one ingredient that I think is missing in the agricultural sector in Ghana. The ability to appreciate the fact that if you don't approach it like a business, it won't succeed, it won't grow. You've said most of what I wanted to say, so thank you so very much. You couldn't have put it better the way you did, using your own life as an example. And I really think that you should be part of a road show that goes around the country to inspire not just the kids who are in school, but in tertiary level, and also those who are already venturing into the business, because you actually have the learning experience. It's a mindset. It truly is. And you really seem to have that extra key that has been missing. We keep talking about how we shouldn't look at how the agric sector should just be left to the elderly people in subsistence, but somehow that transition that moves it from that level to where you have taken it is not happening. And like Mr. Yovo said, we can't leave it to government alone. That's the truth. We recently looked at the budget, and the Ministry of Food and Agric didn't get a lot of what they needed. No ministry ever gets enough of what they need. So if you're looking to government to be the solution to all of your problems, you're looking the wrong way. And this is not a partisan or political statement, it is fact. And this is the reason why we have to find creative ways of supporting so that there's a concept called the triple helix concept, which involves government, it involves industry, and it involves the educational institutions. That is what will help us succeed. Government cannot do it alone. The educational institutions need to understand what does the market need, what are the problems, how can they apply the practical examples as Yara is doing, inculcate that into the curricula so that the students have that practical understanding of the do's and don'ts, so that they have some basic foundation on which to start their journey. Because yes, we learn from failure, but we don't want to keep failing. We must be learning from the mistakes of others and not repeating their mistakes, as a previous speaker mentioned. So if truly we're going to be upscaling the youth and also empowering the youth, it should not just be about encouraging the youth, but policy must reflect that agenda that we have. Once again, a reference to a previous speaker. You can't build a business on hope. It's not enough to do that. Fine if it's political speak, but it must go beyond that. You must have practical means by which people can understand, if I take step 1, 2, and 3, this is going to be the end result. When you have a recipe to bake, you go through the recipe. If you follow the steps, if it's to make bread, you should find bread at the end of that process, even though you start off with flour and yeast and water and whatever else. Whatever it is that we do, that we want to encourage youth in, should be something that can be replicated across board, can be adapted to each situation, so that people can follow those steps and succeed. Otherwise, you're giving people hope and setting them up to fail. And what that does is it creates a vicious cycle where you don't have young people who want to venture into this because they don't have the support systems. And it's not enough to have policy in place. We need to ensure that young people have access to funding. You should not only have access to funding when you have a house as collateral. How many people, when they've just finished a tertiary level training, have a house? And now you're being expected to present that as collateral. Where are you getting that from to prove that you can succeed? And when we look at the startups, this is a big frustration of mine. You hear a lot of noise about people providing money for startups. Sustainability and making sure that they are supported for the next 5 years, for example. Because a lot of businesses, when they start, fail within 24 months. So if you're proudly talking about you have sponsored 1,000 people in year 1, and there's no follow-up to year 5, you can't actually assess what you've achieved. So has your money or your investment, has it been worthwhile? Or have you just set people up and then there's frustration and failure, and then the story continues to circulate that don't go into this field because you won't succeed? But you don't need to look too far to see what agriculture can do. Burkina Faso is just around the corner. We're importing tomatoes from Burkina Faso. I don't understand. Why are we not ensuring that we are creating that space, not just for the cultivation of crops, but the value addition, reading the market, ensuring that the standards of our crops are good enough to export, not just in the sub-region, but abroad, in the European market as well. And one thing I keep harping on is, why should Blue Skies be the only one we keep hearing about? We should be hearing about others, Ghanaian-owned businesses, whose standards are high enough and are able to enter the European market and other markets. I recently, about 2 months ago, a friend of mine, we have a mutual friend, and this person actually exports okra. And I'm telling you, I had okra soup with that okra, and I have not had okra soup this good in years. And I wondered to myself, why are we exporting such good produce and eating mediocre produce? Why are we always settling for less as a people? Let's raise the standard. Let's push ourselves. Let's not accept mediocrity. It's not okay. It's not okay, because all it does is it affects our brand. And people will say, oh, it's made in Ghana. I'm not too sure. There are certain things that we produce here that when people hear this is made in Ghana, they should look at us and say, oh my goodness, that's the one you want to get. I'm sorry to say this, but there's a problem we have with standardization. You can buy a box of made in Ghana chocolate, and in that same box, you find a good one and a bad one. It shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be the case. The taste is completely different. You look at it, it just, oh my goodness. We have to aim high. We must push ourselves. And changing the standard is difficult. It is difficult, but it is worth it, because that kind of an investment, when you raise that standard, people want your product and they will pay for it. Which brings us to another thing. If we are not going to create a market that allows people's produce to be of a certain level, price-wise, who is going to go into agric production? It's not enough to say it's good enough to do it and it's great for the environment, but we should also think about the profit. If we're not going to allow the prices to be within the correct range, and people are just going to be constantly struggling, barely making ends meet, it's not an incentive to get our young people into agric. And agric is not just about planting and rearing livestock. It's also about the business aspect of it. Mr. Boateng, your slides did everything for me. The logistics, the retail end, all of that is part of it. But it's not enough to just do all of these in isolation. But one thing young people must remember, at this point in time, when you're starting small, one of the most helpful things is to collaborate. Because sometimes yours isn't big enough to withstand, whatever pressures. But if you join with others, that collaboration, which is what cooperatives are really about. Sometimes collaboration is better than competition, because that is how, in strengthening yourselves as your numbers come together, you have that robustness to face whatever it is that the shocks may present in your market, or whatever problems there may be. Another thing we can do with regards to empowering and upscaling in this industry is the education. I went to JSS and SSS, not JHS, JSS and SSS, and we had Agric as a core subject for 6 years. In JSS, I did Agric compulsory, 3 years. In SSS and Wesley Girls, I did Agric for 3 years, compulsory. And what it does, it gives you that practical exposure to the subject. It gives you an in-depth understanding of the entire value chain, and whether it's animal husbandry or the crops and crop rotation and this and that and everything else. It gives you an understanding. So there and then you develop a love for it. You understand if that's the way you are inclined. It's not a surprise when you get to university or to the training level and you think, is this what I really want to do? You've already been exposed to it. Ghana has so much arable land. Another thing that we can do is to make sure that certain percentage of our land, which is arable, is not touched by anything else, must be purely for Agric, which involves a whole bunch of things, including land tenure and all of that. Recently in Parliament, that issue was addressed as to whether it will translate into what it has to do with regards to protecting arable land for certain crops remains to be seen. But as a country that has so much arable land, we have no excuse. I was in Jordan about 4 years ago, and I felt sad because that country is mostly desert, and yet they are the breadbasket of the sub-region, that particular area. And yet, my mind went back to Ghana, and I thought, but we have so much. But maybe because we have so much, we take it for granted that it's there, so we don't need to make an effort. But we have to do it. Food security is crucial. And being able to diversify your business is also important because of the different things that affect different crops, different types of, different aspects, whether it's the animals or the plants or whatever it is. And we need to apply science to what we do. Otherwise, you have a crop failure of your mangoes, but you have irrigation in place. All of these are so important. Jordan and Israel don't have that much water. They're very particular when it comes to the farming because the amount of water that each crop requires is measured. And so each crop gets the amount of water it requires at a particular time. So you're not wasting water because it's a limited resource, but you're ensuring that the crop gets what it requires. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. The examples are all around us. We don't need to go very far. So the important thing is to understand, for example, I guess I would at this point make a few points just for the take-home points. The triple helix concept, which I think nicely packaged. I think, Mr. Botting, you actually are a living example of a successful triple helix concept at work, because you, more or less, form the industry, but you've also brought in that educational aspect of it. And with what you did, in achieving what you did, you managed to bring on board the Ministry of Agric. You've got national service students who are coming on board. Those three things, all nicely put together, create what is successful. It's not a one-dimensional thing. Agric has so many facets to it, and the approach to upscaling and empowering the youth must also do the same. But it is not a burden for just the youth to carry, and I think it is unfair for us to say the youth are not doing enough. As a nation, we're not doing enough to empower the youth, and it must reflect in our policies, in our education, and also just in the way we provide funding for the youth. If you can have corporates, if you can have businessmen and women who own their own companies defaulting on payments, it means it's possible for anyone to do so. So why are we not giving the youth the benefit of the doubt, those who are driven and are willing to take risks, and support them to succeed? That's why you have all the monitoring and evaluation to ensure that the money that you've given to someone is being put to the use they said they put it to. So why don't we follow through on that? And then I think finally, what I will also mention is that career guidance. I'm actually quite sad to hear this, but it is the truth, and I've known this for a while, that a lot of people who end up studying Agric at the tertiary level did not choose that as their first subject. Thank God, a lot of people actually fall in love with Agric as they end up doing it. But it means that we are not helping people to understand the beauty of that sector and the beauty in Agric. So we need to do a lot more. Perhaps the National Commission on Civic Education needs to get involved. Perhaps the Ministry of Food and Agric needs to do a bit more, reaching out to younger people at the first and cycle level institutions rather than waiting till tertiary. And perhaps people like Mr. Boateng can do the roadshow, where we have you, even if it's videos of you that we have on social media, where people get to hear your story, and we're telling your story to younger people, to let them see what is possible. So people get out of the mindset of thinking that to be successful, you have to be in an office. You have to be wearing a suit and a tie, and that's a mark of your success. Everything that you have said has proven that where you are is the place to be. And indeed, Agric is the future. So let's celebrate our true heroes, like yourself. I'm surprised I don't see your face on every billboard, actually. Truly, you know, you are an inspiration. I think the other thing as well is we should look at the tax incentives and reliefs for those who are in the sector, in the country. Because the cost of production here is so high. And we even make it more difficult for those who are going the distance because we're making it so much cheaper to import all these things that we can actually produce here. A lot more needs to be done. So perhaps the other thing is to have really strong civil society organizations who are speaking for the Agric sector, speaking for the youth in Agric, to put more pressure where it needs to be, specifically on government, to ensure that we are making that space really, really, really attractive for the youth. The demographic dividend is scary, and it threatens us as a nation if we don't do something about it. Let's not waste the youthful energy that we have. There's so much possible, but it has to do with a collaboration from all sectors. And so with that, I will thank you so much for your attention, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Zenator Rawlings.